Hello and good afternoon from Cali in Colombia, where we're at the UN Biodiversity Conference, COP16, the 16th Conference of Parties to the UN Biodiversity Convention. And it's 12 o'clock here, just past 12 noon in Colombia, 5 o'clock in the UK. And thanks so much for joining us. This is the 11th broadcast from Cali from the Wildlife Trust to update you about what's happening in the negotiations, what's happening in and around this COP, and critically what it means for the UK and what we need to do in the UK to deliver on those international commitments. Rob Stoneman's not with me today, my partner in crime. He's actually already gone over to the Blue Zone this morning to join a Wetlands International discussion about peatlands. If there's anything to do with peatlands, you can't stop Rob Stoneman. So he's over there. He got the bus early, got over to the Blue Zone for that discussion about peatlands in particular. But earlier this morning in Cali, we did go and get an update from UK officials, UK government officials, DEFRA officials, and the negotiators on the current state of the negotiations. And really the message is there's a lot left still to do. I mean, officially this COP is supposed to finish Friday night, tomorrow. But as ever happens with these, there's still a lot of frantic discussions going on to try and get agreement between the almost 200 countries that are members of the Convention on Biological Diversity. They were likely to be working through the night tonight to try and get a clean negotiating text for agreeing tomorrow. There's really sticky decisions still to take place, particularly around digital sequencing information. We've talked about this in previous updates. This is the kind of idea that we try and create a fund where companies like pharmaceutical companies pay into a fund to recognise the payments that are needed to protect biodiversity and the indigenous communities that protect them, for all that genetic resource that actually is going to be so important for humanity going forward and important commercially. So let's recognise that as well. And Kathryn, why don't you give us an update about other things you've been following your end?
Yeah, it's as you say, we're getting into the crunch period now in the negotiations, and we have seen some draft decision text being finalised and being put to the plenary. So that's now ready to be agreed. And you can see that text appearing on the CBD website, but mainly it's for the issues that were probably a little bit less controversial. So things like alien invasive species, mainstreaming biodiversity across sectors. But interestingly, yesterday, the high-level segments, this is where ministers and heads of state are negotiating. Antonio Guterres was here. He's the UN Secretary General, and he gave a press conference, which I was watching earlier today, where he was really pushing for a much more ambitious take on how we live with nature going forward. So this peace with nature strapline that's been the kind of line for the COP. And he was making a real emphasis on shifting economic models and pushing BSAP. So
Isn't there about whether there should be a reference in the Convention on Biological Diversity in this agreement out of this to the Paris Agreement, and of course the target of 1.5. But there's sadly, of course, some of the petrostates here in Cali this week are trying to stop that, block that.
Yeah. And you would think that wouldn't be controversial because on the UNF, the UNFCCC, the climate side, that has been signed up to. The 1.5-degree goal was signed up to years ago. But yes, you're right. There is still some sticky text going on with that. We'll have to see where that ends up tomorrow as well. But I think the main thing that we've been looking at really is that so far, we've still only seen 37 countries submit their action plans, which is the implementation of the global framework. That's what this COP was all about. And we're still waiting on another 160 to come in, including the UK. And we know that the UK's plan has been delayed because of the general election, and in England in particular because of the review of the environmental improvement plan at the moment. So we need to see really that stepped up. And also digital sequencing information, as you said, that's proving quite sticky, and that's going back to get the presidency involved now to see if they can unstick that over the next 48 hours.
Great, thank you, Kathryn. A few other things just to look out for in the next 24 hours as well. There's all these debates still around funding, and a debate whether you create a new fund to get the finance through for biodiversity around the world, or whether it's done for existing funds like the Global Environment Facility. But also, of course, there will be a discussion about where to host the next COP, COP17 in 2 years' time, and therefore who the president of that process will be as well. So all things to look out for. So thanks very much for that update, Kathryn. We are entering the last 24, 48 hours of this COP, and that's when it always gets very interesting as the negotiators try and get a deal. My sense is it probably will go quite late on Friday night as they try and get agreement, particularly the stuff around digital secrecy information. I mean, the COP president, Susanna Mohammed, the Colombian government, is really, really keen to get some good outcomes from this COP. So I think they're prepared to go into the early hours of Saturday through to Saturday morning, if need be, to try and make sure they get those agreements. So we'll have to see what happens. It will be absolutely fascinating over the next 24, 48 hours. So watch this space. Now, as ever, we try and talk through in these updates about what all this means in the international negotiations. What does it mean for the UK? And often we've been referring this report that we published as the Wildlife Trust just before COP16, local to global, the Global Biodiversity Framework and what it means for the UK. My colleagues will be putting a link in the chat to that, so you can download a version of that. And in there, we set out all the targets in the Global Biodiversity Framework and what needs to be done in the UK to deliver on them. Target 10 is all about agriculture. It is that aquaculture, fisheries and forests should be sustainably managed. And of course, that's something at the Wildlife Trust we worked for many years on, working with farmers, particularly nature-friendly farmers, to try and deliver that. Also, target 2 is around the restoration of degraded ecosystems. Target 15 is the involvement of non-state actors, including the corporate sector. And for many, many years now, the Wildlife Trusts have had a really important partnership with Jordan's, who of course make those lovely cereals that you know. And the partnership has been one where we've been having farm advisors from the Wildlife Trusts going onto Jordan's farms and advising Jordan's farmers all about nature-friendly farming. Let's have a little bit more of a look about what's involved in that partnership and how it relates to COP16.
I'm Richard Morell, and welcome to the farm here. We farm about 1,000 acres in the Vale of York. We grow wheat, and of course we grow oats for Jordan cereals, which is great. You can see here part of the habitat that is involved in our 10% of the farm that is for nature, for Jordan. What I wanted to do is move to a more natural way of farming, work with the environment rather than against it. What I get from having the Jordan's advisors, their depth of knowledge on these individual habitats and so on is a lot better than mine. So I can get the advice both where we're going to go in the future, how we're going to deliver that, and also what's working, looking around the habitats, what it's delivering for individual species, and the effectiveness of what we're doing. I know that governments are meeting shortly in Colombia to discuss global biodiversity. I think what we've done here with Jordan's Farm Partnership and the Wildlife Trusts is give an example of what can be achieved to significantly help progress on farms with a combination of supportive contracts from a buyer, help from experts such as the Wildlife Trusts, and make a real difference, not greenwashing, just real action on the ground, which the Jordan's Farm Partnership has delivered. And seeing where we're stood here in East Yorkshire, the habitats that we're providing, the improvements that we're seeing on the farm, it's great to see. I think for the future, it's something that needs to be done on a global scale. I've been growing oats for Jordan's for probably 15, 20 years. I think what's happened in that period has been fantastic. The support we've had, the flexibility on each farm with the advisor to put in the correct habitat, move forwards, progress what we're doing every year is great. Hopefully what we've achieved and done as the Jordan's Farm Partnership with the Wildlife Trusts is something that could move and be done in other areas, maybe other products for other companies, help farmers support nature and move into a more sustainable way of farming. It's a more interesting way to farm, it's satisfying, saving the world. What's really, as I said, what's not to like about it?
Isn't that a great video? Great to see that happening. And I have to say, I love those Jordan cereals. Super Berry Good Granola is my particular favourite. But I think, you know, in that film, we're really learning about the role of green skills in all that. I mean, the farmer there was talking about the very highly skilled farm advisors that we have at the Wildlife Trusts who work along farmers and give advice about how they can improve the land for nature. Likewise, actually yesterday, in our broadcast, we featured the York Peak Partnership, which I've been and visited. It's obviously coordinated by Yorkshire Wildlife Trust. It involves a number of organisations, and that involves a huge amount of skills necessary for that. I mean, obviously, yes, ecologists, but also drone operators for doing the surveys, geographic information system experts, peatland restoration experts, contract managers, digger drivers, a whole back office, of course, of finance, HR, marketing, IT, and communications. And actually, the Yorkshire Peak Partnership is now running Lantra approved courses. So Lantra is one of the leading award bodies for land-based industries, both in the UK and Ireland. And the Yorkshire Peak Partnership is offering awarding as a Lantra approved training for peatland restoration to ensure there's enough skilled people to take on the challenge of restoring the UK peatlands. And really across COP16 over the last couple of weeks, we've seen an increasing need. It's become really clear the need for us to really invest in skills across the nature sector, globally, but particularly, of course, in the UK. And yes, that means within big NGOs like the Wildlife Trust. The Wildlife Trust collectively, we have 3,700 staff, would you believe, nowadays? And obviously our friends at the ISPB, National Trust, Woodland Trust and others, they all have a need for big investment in skills as well. But the really beauty is as nature restoration goes into the mainstream, it's not just NGOs that need to do this. We need those skills in government, we need them in businesses, we need them in banks and investment institutions. We need to make sure that there's a much greater, deeper understanding, a much greater skills around nature restoration and green skills right across the economy. So yesterday we caught up with a good friend of the Wildlife Trust, Sarah Mukherjee. She's the chief executive of what's known as IEMA, that's the Institute for Environmental Management and Assessment, which really brings together some of the real experts around environmental management around the world. She's a chief executive, and we asked her about the need to invest in green skills.
There are all these things that are being talked about, you know, protecting wildlife, protecting reserves, extra skills, sustainable finance, but none of them will work unless you are providing people with the opportunity to develop their skills and to train them. Every action that saves the planet has someone behind it with a skill, whether that's really specialist or really general. And we are amazed at IEMA that the one thing that you don't really hear in every conversation is skills, training and capacity development. Everybody smiles and nods, yes, very important when you say that, but there's very little talk about how you actively put that into some of the many discussions that we're having today. I mean, let's be honest, some more corporate organisations do. I think environment NGOs, the environment sector sometimes doesn't really value people's professional development, not just their skills. People are incredibly well skilled in the environment sector, but it's not just about that. It's about how you deliver a presentation. It's about how you communicate, how you build teams, how you ensure that your teams have got well-being and are being supported. Those kind of modern skills that proper professional development will give you. It's like a language. Some people need to be bilingual. Some people just need to be able to order from a restaurant menu. Some people just need to be able to say hello, goodbye, and thank you. And all of those are covered within language learning in the same way that all of that is covered within sustainability training, those sort of levels. And there's also a big piece about equity and equality. It's really difficult to get into this, you know, really quite white, quite middle class sector unless you have the right skills. These COPs, they always give you kind of, it's a parallel really good, really bad experience. I'll start with the bad and end with the good. The bad is listening to people in meetings, putting its or the in and out of a document for 50 or 60 minutes. And you think, really, you know, the world will actually burn up before we get to agree in this bit. On the other hand, you meet brilliant, brilliant young people who come here and they are just doing it. They're building farms, they're building businesses, they're really making a difference to their communities. And they, frankly, you know, it's that enthusiasm that keeps you going.
Isn't it brilliant hearing from Sarah Mukherjee there, Chief Exec of IEMA, the Institute for Environmental Management and Assessment, and telling it very clearly how important it is for us to invest in and recognise green skills as we train people in it. And I'm delighted for us to be joined today by my colleague Jen Davis. Hello, Jen. How are you doing?
Hi, Craig. Yeah, not bad, thank you.
Good to see you. So Jen Davis is Education and Learning Manager with the Wildlife Trusts. And Jen, you know, we're always talking about the need to be constantly investing in and developing green skills. But I mean, let's move it on also to the fact about how you get into the sector in the first place, how you get your kind of first job in this, which is something that I find people are always very interested in, because the fact is, you know, just having the skills, that even if you've got the green skills, having the skills is not always enough, is it? Sadly, there can
No.
still be barriers. Talk to us about that.
There are. No, you're absolutely right. Some of it comes down to the publication of the opportunities that are out there. How obvious is it to lots of different members of our communities what the opportunities could be for them, and how it goes to Sarah's point, really, how accessible those opportunities are. You know, typically a lot within our industry, it's white, middle class sort of perceptions, and some people have lived experience of exclusionary recruitment practices. All the things that we, particularly at Wildlife Trust, are tackling at the moment, are working really hard to tackle to make sure that we have genuine pathways for people to join us, and not just as experts. I think that's the other part of the puzzle. It's okay, I think, for organizations to bring people in, especially younger people, emerging adults, bring them in and develop the skills as they learn on the job. The whole grow your own ethos can really lead to such a diverse and really committed and loyal workforce that will grow as the business grows. So no, it's not just about get a qualification, get the right skills. The context around that is so important. It's around finding the right opportunities, making sure they're publicised in the right places, and that you've got lots of different pathways for people to be able to access it. You know, it's traditionally, again, you look at our sector in particular, it's very higher education sort of centric. You go, you do a degree, you do your masters. Actually, there's loads of amazing vocational routes in now that you can do. There's over 200 sort of apprenticeship pathways now that have sustainability within them. They're not necessarily green skills or green jobs, but the focus is absolutely there. And you can go from an entry level, which is sort of a level 2, a level 3, GCSE A level, all the way through to level 7 on an apprenticeship in some of these areas, which is a master's degree. And you can do that either new into the role, or, as Sarah mentioned, when you're thinking about workforce development as well, you can do it in situ once you're in your job to develop those skills. So I think it's just, again, it's looking at what we need for, you know, a modern society. New ways of working, new ways of reaching people will also support this kind of skills gap that we've got.
Absolutely, so essential. In the jargon, we talk about non-traditional routes into the sector, don't we? To try and diversify and make sure that there's lots of different routes into the conservation sector. And of course, it's really important, as I say, as we mainstream this, as banks, investment houses, companies, and government all try and have more and more people working in this, they need to diversify those routes in as well.
Yeah.
And are we seeing more increasing interest from young people in wanting to join this sector?
I think there's interest, but again, there's huge confusion about what they can do, and there's a big sort of preconception that you have to go through a traditional university route, and that's something that we're working really, really hard to tackle. I mean, actually, right now we're about to have our first T-level industry student come and join the Wildlife Trusts. There will be a student joining Northumberland Wildlife Trust from their local college, and that student is going to be working with the trust for you know, up to sort of 6 months, a couple of days a week, working on a digital program supporting the EDI content of Northumberland Wildlife Trust website. that's a fantastic way to get a young person looking at the Wildlife Trust from a completely different perspective. No, they're not coming in to do a traditional conservation-based role, but actually doing something slightly different. They're going to learn so much about what we do, what the roots are. They may then go back to college and think about they may want to come and work with us in the future, or actually just apply some of the skills that we've taught them to their everyday lives. So when they do go on to find a career, be it in whatever industry they want, they can apply some of the good decision making and the good behaviors that we all need to be demonstrating to sort of put nature into recovery. And that's really what it's about as well. It's not just skills for a job. This is about preparing the next generation to have that good decision making in whatever career they take that will benefit nature and the environment.
Well, brilliant, Jenny. Jen, thank you so much, Jen. That's Jen Davis, Education and Learning Manager at the Wildlife Trust. Thanks so much for joining us today, Jen. Really good to hear from you. And also joining us today, you've been watching, telling us where you've been joining us from. Thank you so much. Just give a shout out to a few of you. Hello to Jodie on Instagram, Ben in East Sussex, Alini in Derbyshire, Peter in West Bromwich, Bob in Market Harbour, and Julie in Worcestershire. I must admit, after being out here in Colombia for 2 weeks, it feels a bit odd to me sometimes be mentioning all those place names I'm so familiar with back home, but brilliant that you could be joining us today. And I'm delighted that we've had so many people joining and watching these updates every day. Many thousands of people have been watching these updates from the Wildlife Trust, so thank you so much for doing that every day. Tomorrow is the last day of COP16 here in Cali in Colombia, and as I was saying earlier, it will be a real last-minute scramble tomorrow to try and get a final text into play and to try and get agreement between the almost 200 countries that are members of the Convention on Biological Diversity. We expect that to go late into the night, Friday night, perhaps even into the early hours of Saturday morning. We shall see. So we'll be bringing you all the updates from that. Also tomorrow, in tomorrow's broadcast and update, I'm delighted to say that we'll be bringing you an interview with Tony Juniper, Chair of Natural England, who's been out here helping the negotiations this week for the UK government. We caught up with him just yesterday about COP16 and what it means for the UK, and we're bringing that interview with Tony Juniper tomorrow. So that's not one to miss. But for now, we're out of time. That's the end of today's update. Thanks so much for joining. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. Goodbye.